Then out spake brave Horatius, the captain of the gate. To every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods?
Aisling leapt in front of Emily, shielding her from Varian's next attack. Trig took the offensive, sending a pulse of telekinetic energy at Varian, who was caught in the blast and thrown backward. Meanwhile, Callie and her SWAT team attempted to detain Sebakira and Conti, a task that quickly proved difficult. Conti spread her wings and took flight. Sebakira reared onto her hind legs and roared, a blue light emitting from her mouth as though she was going to breathe soulfire. "Eyes and ears!" Callie screamed as she pulled the pin on a modified flashbang grenade. Conti dove on Callie's position, spraying blue soulfire as she went. None of the supernatural flame reached Callie, though. Aisling had seen the attack coming and responded with her own power. At Aisling's command, the skies let loose a torrent of rain and wind, extinguishing Conti's attack. At the same moment, Blake dive-tackled Varian, pinning her, or him, to the pavement. "Get off! Let go of me!" Varian screamed. At that moment, Callie's flashbang detonated. The darkened airport was suddenly illuminated, brighter than the sun for a single moment. All of the gifted creations were instantly incapacitated. Sebakira, Conti, Trig, and Aisling collapsed to the ground. Conti was airborne when it happened, and she fell from the sky as though she was dead. Marisol and Aisling both ran to catch Conti before she hit the pavement. Aisling got there first. She caught Conti and then screamed in pain as Conti's beak impaled her arm. Emily curled up on the ground, too distracted by her own injuries to pay attention to the events happening around her. Mina tripped over Emily as she tried to run toward Akira, and when Mina looked up again, she saw Akira lying face down on the tarmac. The anti-psionic weapon had affected her too. "Akira!" Mina screamed. "Get up!" But Akira refused. "Not gonna fight." Akira seethed as she sat up. "Don't want to fight you guys." "Well, that sounds like a surrender to me," Callie panted as she ran over to Akira's position. Then Callie addressed the rest of her SWAT team. "Just cuff everyone. We don't have time for this bullshit." With all of the gifted creations momentarily out of action, the SWAT team was able to quickly regain control of the situation. Trig, Mina, Varian, Conti, Sebakira, Emily, and Aisling were all bound with zip ties and bundled aboard the nearby Paradox Learjet. Blake and Marisol were nearly restrained as well, but the two members of the Countermeasures Committee, Hurton and Bella, objected. Once the whole group was safely aboard the jet, it began to taxi onto the main runway. From his place at the head of the passenger compartment, Hurton spoke to the group. "Look, I get that some of you characters have issues with each other. Bella tells me that this Akira girl has fought some of you in your respective stories, and maybe your grievances are valid, but the fact is we simply do not have time to put up with this. Our real enemy is still out there, and if Akira wants to defect, we have to take advantage of that." Struggling against his or her restraints, Varian said, "It'll be a cold day in hell when I team up with that genocidal maniac over there." "Then I won't ask you to team up with me," Akira said. "Just use the information I have to beat Malum." Aisling tried to stand up, but she was bound more heavily than the others. Callie had warned her team about Aisling's ability to shapeshift, so the young fairy had been tied up by the wrists and ankles, and something resembling a dog collar was fitted around Aisling's neck. It was attached to a leash being held by one of Callie's troopers. When Aisling tried to stand, said trooper forcefully pushed her back into her seat, so Aisling raised her voice instead. "That's what I've been trying to tell all of you. She knows something. We need to know everything she does." Blake, who was using a damp cloth and a first aid kit to nurse Emily's head wound, looked around at Aisling. "She's right," Blake said. "I'm with Aisling," Marisol added. Aisling felt a warm and cozy sensation filling her heart when she realized both of her creators were taking her side in the argument. Marisol gave Aisling a reassuring look. Aisling did not say anything. She just ran up the aisle and gave Marisol a hug before returning to her seat. As Aisling sat down again, the dumbfounded trooper held up 2 sets of zip ties and the leash, saying, "I was looking right at you. How did you slip out of these without me seeing?" Meanwhile, Marisol redirected the conversation at Akira. "We have to stop Malum. Please, if there's anything you can tell us, we need to know about it now." Hurton, Blake, and Trig focused on Akira with the most intensity. Akira pointed at Trig. "You know about Malum's end goal," she said. "He told you in your story. Malum wants to conquer and rule the multiverse Blake has been building in his own stories. And Malum thinks that he has to start his conquest here in the real world." "I remember that much," Trig said. "Please tell me you've got the missing pieces." "I do," Akira said. She launched into her explanation while Varian sulked in the back of the plane. "Malum's plan for the real world is twofold. He knows that he comes from a work of fanfiction, so he wants to speed up the whole conquest thing by controlling both the author and the game the stories are based on. Malum wanted to kill Macavity 116, Blake, and replace him with a creator Malum could control, probably History Dude or Family Tree Enthusiast. Then, Malum was going to take over Paradox Interactive and force the game developers to rework the game, to make it easier for him to invade other realities and dimensions. Paradox HQ is going to be the nerve center of the Broken Gates network." Marisol interrupted. "The Broken Gates? Those are the dimensional portals Malum was using to move around his own story." Akira nodded. "Malum's branched out," she said. "He found a way to infiltrate other stories, other realities, using the reality perforator. When he got somewhere new, he'd build a broken gate and connect it to his sanctum." "The sanctum I destroyed at the end of my story," Trig commented. "One and the same," Akira confirmed. "There were 6 broken gates. One in his sanctum, another in the dream world where you and Tenna used to hang out. There's another in the Shroud, specifically the version of the Shroud that appeared in After Everything, Blake's very first book. After that, he built another gate inside the world of Blake's newest book, Last Days of the Emerald Isle. He concealed it inside of the dimensional rift the Olenbar used to invade Ireland. Then the 5th gate is in the world of a story called Grand Theft Stellaris. It's underneath a city, in the wreck of a buried starship." Blake swore. "Aw, fuck. He put it inside the wreck of the Blind Fury. Callie, there's a broken gate right under your hometown." "I feel like I'm gonna be sick," Callie groaned. "So, what about the 6th gate?" Bella asked. "Where is it?" Akira took a deep breath. "They weren't finished building it when I ran away," she said. "But it's here, in the real world. It's on an island in the middle of that river that runs through the middle of Stockholm." All of the color went out of Hurton's face. He reached for his cell phone, seemingly forgetting that he was in an airplane thousands of meters above Europe. "I need to make a call," Hurton said, his voice shaking. "There's more," Akira said in a low voice. "Malum's plan hinges on the reality perforator, but he's serious about turning Paradox headquarters into his new base. Blake, I don't know how to tell you this, but Malum has been visiting all of your previous stories. Ever since Trig wounded him, he's been gathering up all sorts of stuff to increase his psionic powers. He's going to move his collection into Paradox HQ once he takes it." Blake furrowed his brow, thinking hard. Marisol did the same. After a few moments, she said, "Oh, God. Blake, I think this one's on me." Everyone looked at Marisol. She addressed the rest of the group, but kept her eyes on Trig. "It was my idea," Marisol said. "In Song of the Solitaire, I wrote the final draft of Trig's fight with Malum. I wanted Trig to have this turning point where he started to unlock his full psionic powers without realizing it, so I wrote that when Trig burned Malum with soulfire, he left a persistent psionic injury that would burn Malum any time he tried to use a broken gate. Akira snapped her fingers, looking excited. Yes, he's been getting burned, Akira said, then turned to face Trig. I don't know what exactly you did, but the injury is compounding. Every time Malum goes through the broken gates, the burns get worse. He actually quit trying and pretty much got stuck in Grand Theft Stellaris while he was searching for a solution. I guess he found one, Blake said. You mentioned he was taking psionic artifacts from some of my other stories? Akira nodded. He's got 3 right now. I think he wanted 6, but with everything that's happened, he must have put the collecting on hold. Trig raised his hand and interrupted. Akira, he's been collecting a lot longer than that. Tenna and I smashed up a bunch of artifacts he took from other worlds when we wrecked his sanctum. Marisol let out a gasp and started counting on her fingers. I remember! Song of the Solitaire, Chapter 57. Blake, we spelled out exactly what relics he had. The Guidestone of Karak, the Isolated Contingency Core, the Shadow Keeper, and Jericho's Eternal Flame. Akira raised an eyebrow. The Shadow Keeper? Why does Malum have my mother's gun? That gun was part of some of the most famous scenes in the Stormbreaker universe, Blake said. It's the gun that killed you. Akira's eyes widened, and she let out a low whistle. I'm going to be killed by the Shadow Keeper. My mother's gun. The gun I used to kill my own father? Wow, Blake. You really are a demented writer, she said. Guilty, Blake admitted. So is it safe to assume Malum has the Shadow Keeper now? That's bad. Why is it bad? Aisling asked. The Shadow Keeper has a special power, Marisol explained. It makes a huge cloud of smoke that lets the user disappear for a few seconds. Sebakira raised her paw. There are psionic techniques that allow one to conceal themselves. Why would Malum go to such trouble to acquire this weapon, when it would be easier to learn how to cast Bending Reed? Aisling had the answer. Malum is static. Marisol said so. Maybe he can't learn new psionics. A small voice came from just beside Blake. Didn't you hear what Marisol said on the other plane? Emily said. We are more than our backstories. We can learn and grow and develop. Malum can't. We can change here in the real world, and it all starts with our understanding. Blake looked at Emily. You sound like someone whose understanding has changed, he said. Emily smiled. My Blake has a different way of caressing me when I'm hurt, she said. You're not totally off the mark, but just wrong enough that I noticed. The moment was ruined by Hurton. He had stepped away for a moment to make a phone call, but now returned to the passenger area. Everyone, I have some very bad news, Hurton said. It's Malum. He's made his move. About 1 hour previous, Vetu emerged from the broken gate. The first thing she saw was Malum Ralpakin. He stood on a rocky hilltop, the highest point of Little Rothalman Island. She announced herself in a meek voice. My love, I've brought it here, just as you asked. Did you enjoy visiting your story again? Malum asked, without looking at her. No, Vetu replied. My story was a miserable one. I'm happy to be free of it. Malum turned around and waited for Vetu to climb the little hill. She reached out and offered him a long, thin package. Malum took it and undid the wrapping. Inside the package, Malum found a crystal sword. It was the Soul Keeper, an anti-psionic weapon that belonged to Vetu Kealoha. She used it throughout multiple books in the Stormbreaker universe. Made from crystalline protodermis and wrapped around an Illyrium core, the bluish-green blade was a psionic insulator. So long as the user kept a firm grip on the handle, he would be totally immune to telepathic attack. Moments later, Cassandra Espinosa appeared. She was carrying a strange bundle, a metal backpack connected to an armband by several dozen electrical cables. A dim green light could be seen through a circular porthole on the back. "I made sure to take it from the early chapter, like you said," Cassandra explained. "My mom doesn't know it's gone." She handed over the Prometheus device. This contraption was a custom-built psionic amplifier, owned and operated, until moments ago, by a different version of Akira Robinson. When worn, it would amplify and strengthen the psionic powers of the user. "Remember, you cannot use both of these things at the same time," Cassandra said. "The Soul Keeper will restrict your own gift when you're holding it." As Malum donned the Prometheus device, he asked one final question. "Where is the sarcophagus?" "Late, but it will be here," Cassandra replied. Then she offered a heavy canvas bag to Malum. He reached out his hand, and Cassandra turned the bag over. The reality perforator, shining in the night like a miniature moon, fell into Malum's outstretched palm. Vetu and Cassandra followed Malum. Along the way, Kiri, Dak, Mocha, and Ushka joined them. Malum and Ushka enveloped the rest of the team in their powers, and they walked across the surface of the Soderstrom as though it was made of glass. Hundreds of dumbfounded Swedes watched as Malum's team came ashore. Without breaking stride, the group advanced along Hornsgatten before turning south. Cars and trucks came to a stop as the Great Khan and his followers walked down the center of the roadway. City dwellers pulled out their cell phones to document the procession. Finally, Vetu spotted a red-haired woman wearing a blue dress, waving to the group from a street corner. Tana Honora had also taken the time to visit one of Blake's previous stories. She too was armed with a psionic weapon, a pair of celestial gauntlets taken from After Everything. "They've barricaded themselves inside," Tana reported. "Nothing stands in my way," Malum said. He raised his right hand. The Ven brace wrapped around his forearm hummed as it was fed energy by the Prometheus device on his back. Malum approached the front entrance of Paradox Interactive headquarters. "I am Malum Ralpakin, Great Khan and Master of the Pathways Between Realities. I command you to open your doors at once." Malum's voice boomed through the city streets. Hundreds of onlookers watched curiously, cell phones raised. Very few of them realized they were in danger. When the employees of Paradox Interactive ignored Malum's demand, he activated the Prometheus device with one hand. With the other, he touched his own chest. A small ember appeared in his hand, quickly erupting into green soul fire. Malum spoke to the emerald flames as though he was praying. "Your days are over, Blake Robinson and Paradox Interactive. I have come to reclaim my destiny. This is my story now, and I am the hero." Malum took a deep breath, let out a blood-curdling war cry, and launched the assault on Paradox headquarters.